All right, so yes, the clicker for sure. Thank you. The last speaker. The last speaker, bat and clean up today. So I'm really excited to be able to share with you the story that I have about my experience with the Business Agility Conference. The secret sauce is this. So last year, I actually applied to be a speaker. And Chris Edwards sent me an email, and we worked for the same company at the time, and sent me an email that says, no, you're rejected. I'm like, I thought I knew what this was, and I found this treasure of agility and business agility and the concepts of what it was. Wow, what a treasure, new discovery for me, a new world. I had no idea. So I started researching more and recognized that, you know what? It's a whole new language. I didn't know how to speak Hubert. I didn't understand what it actually meant for my space. My focus is in organizational development and leadership, not so much on the tech side, but really on a leadership side of the entire organization. So learning some of the new language. I showed up at the conference last year in New York, thinking I was like, oh, right, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to learn. And I just fell out of place. I didn't know what was all about. I'm sitting in this sea of wonderful animals, and I'm a completely different beast. And saying, how do I take this back? And listening to the stories and the applications of what people have done with flattening their organizations. One of the ones, the management tax, was a good talk last year that completely resonated with me. And I walked back, and suddenly as I walked out the door, I could start seeing through the matrix. I could see it. And as I got home, I was considering saying, do I take the blue pill or the red pill and say, what do I do to be able to get out of the matrix to free my mind as it relates to being an organizational development and leadership coach? How do I make this work in an organization? And then I had an idea. Great, I can start incorporating some of these concepts, smaller teams, much more responsive to how do we want to work together, ways of working, and just it exploded the opportunities of what it and gave me new language. And then I got a phone call. So they called me up and said, hey, Bret, we love you to come and help. Our team, our entire team is going through a transformation right now. And I said, really? Tell me more. It sounds intriguing. So I'm listening to this. They say, we're going on a journey. And there's two sides of this. We're reorganizing our team and making these feature teams, these tribes, because we're a developer company and this is what we do. And I said, fantastic. I said, we would like you to work with our leaders. Okay, great. I can do that. That's my space. Okay, so looking at some of the ways, the reporting lines, communication, yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking, all right, cool. I'm going to come in and do my team building type repertoire, the same exercises that go through the entire time. You know, the normal stuff. This is what I do. Loved it. So one of the things I teach a lot is that Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions. Anybody have read that book? Yeah, fantastic book, right? Foundation of it, all of it is based on, what's the bottom? Trust, right? And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I heard a lot about trust at that conference last year. And how many did we hear today? The last couple days where we hear leaders and saying, the leaders are the bottleneck. The leaders are this, fill in the blank. Great, leadership, I can do that. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to train leadership, doing some workshops around the leaders, and suddenly they're going to be doing simultaneously going through Scrum training and Agile training and changing their ways of working. It's fantastic. So we're parallel going, the feature teams are going through this. I'm going through the leadership. Man, this is going to be awesome. So I figured, one of the best ways for leaders to come together in teams is to create a common language. So I'm like, all right, there's finally a convergence of what I learned and really can see through the matrix and see the potentiality with this and what I'm doing in team building and thinking that they're going to come together as a team around this common language. Truth was no. Because the trust was not there of the team. The trust on the team didn't exist. And I knew that as a leadership coach because I'm working with this team and what that looked like when there's trust. The way I define trust is the equation here is credibility plus reliability plus vulnerability, which was mentioned earlier. She's sitting right now, but she mentioned vulnerability about creating that vulnerability of leaders divided by self-orientation. Now, credibility and reliability comes over time through doing the work and being reliable around it. The two variables that leaders can affect the most are vulnerability and self-orientation. Self-orientation meaning how do I view myself in terms of everyone else? If I'm really nervous about myself speaking right now, I have a high self-orientation because I'm more freaked out about myself than you guys. If I have a low self-orientation, it's more about me giving the gifts, kind of a servant mentality. So if you look at this is what we coach in leadership all the time, is how do you create vulnerability? How do you create this where you can put yourself out there? And what vulnerability sounds like is, I was wrong. That idea is actually better than mine. I need your help. I screwed up. I don't understand. I'm sorry, and I don't know. Now, without taking a very informal poll, how many times have you actually heard an executive leader say this? Any of these statements? Okay, not a large majority. Trust, vulnerability-based trust, is being able to say that I'm sorry, I screwed up, I don't understand, I don't know the answer. And this team was no exception. Questions would happen, somebody would come up with a new idea and say, hey boss, I think we should do this. And he happened to be another methodology guy, if you will. Okay, we'll leave that one unsaid. And they were working through Agile process. And we say, hey, I think we should do it this way because we're doing this sprint and I'm learning the language, right? And he said, no, I don't think we should do that. Conversation's over. No discussion, no feedback, no retros. Or the retros that were very superficial. Does anyone have any questions or comments how we could do this better? Silence. Does this sound familiar? Anybody? Yeah, get some head nods here. So vulnerability, the fact that this team had such a dearth, such a deficit of trust that they weren't able to move forward even with the best methodology and the best training. They spent thousands of dollars on having these trainers come out. I was an internal resource at the time, was working with them, and I was free in essence, but they were paying a lot of money to have these people come in, but it was a non-starter. So when you have a culture of distrust, the characteristics of a team that has distrust, just life as usual. We've heard some really good organizations over the last couple of days about how they've created these wonderful, powerful teams. And if I wonder, I'm like, man, what's the trust factor? Where is that trust? Not the predictable type trust where I can count on you to do the work, but actually, are you able to say, I trust myself, I trust my group enough to give you feedback and not feel like you're going to cut my head off or get upset or frustrated or defensive or fill in the blank? That's a low trust environment. And we all get to work through that. And so why I'm calling this today the secret sauce is all of what we talked about today and yesterday comes back to where are you in the spectrum of trust? And how is it that you as a practitioner, as a consultant, as an internal resource, can contribute to those relationships of trust where people feel like they can say, I'm sorry. You know what? That's a better idea. And have those retros that we heard about this afternoon, and they're very valuable, and people look forward to the opportunity to be inspected, look forward to the opportunity to give feedback, and create that trust. A recent survey from Gallup, 3 out of 10 strongly agree that their opinion counts at work. Ugh. Low trust. I'm going to go through this. When you don't have trust, it's like basically playing the do not pass go, do not collect $200, go to jail, because you will start and stop and start and stop and wonder, what is wrong with my team? Don't they see the potentiality and the benefits of going through this transformation? Don't they see it? Of course they do. That's a cognitive process. But what we're dealing with is leaders that are struggling with the adoption because maybe it's an indictment on their credibility. Maybe they're feeling a little incompetent with a P because they don't know the space. They're not comfortable with the methodology. We heard yesterday from Jim that said, look, leaders are just, they're tired of hearing about this stuff. It'll be the flavor of the month. As you look and coach and work with leaders, it's about the trust to get them to be confident and comfortable with that self-orientation and say, I'm okay with not being okay. I'm okay with being scratchy and uncomfortable for a moment. I'm okay with challenging my assumptions, and it can come from anyone. Because we can't move forward without trust. Brene Brown, anyone familiar with her stuff? Vulnerability-based trust, that's all her research, all of it. Can push you to read her stuff. It's fantastic research. She said, trust is the product of vulnerability that grows over time and requires work, attention, and full engagement. It's a process. Especially those who have virtual teams here, like not all co-located. Most of us, a lot of us, right? That's even worse. It's even harder because I don't have the luxury of taking it to coffee to work things out, that we get to work through that. So trust is such a huge factor that goes into it, and it's so fragile. It takes a while to build, but then it's destroyed really instantly. And think about this, the best laid plans, the best trained people, you can have all the certified people on the planet. But again, if the trust isn't there, yeah, we'll just skip this retro for now. We don't need to work that way. That contract, it doesn't need to be scoped out that way. Or we're not really, these small teams aren't working. We're skipping stand-up. The list goes on. So what I did with this team is focused on the leader. That was my story. I said, you know what? I told the HR business partner that called me in and said, hey, can you help with this? I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to focus on the leader. Because I can do all the fun classes and all the team building with everybody, and they'll love it. And they do. They love it. It's all the people that are like, we love this. Thank you so much. And they soak it up like a sponge, and they told us, this is what we need this. And then the question, just like maybe some of you today, is ... I wish my leader heard this. Yeah? Amens? Right? I wish my leader was here. I wish they could hear what we're saying right now. Yet the leader's not there. So I said, I'm not going to do this. We're going to flip the script here. I'm going to focus on the leader. So worked with creating the comfort level around vulnerability and worked through our change model. How many of you guys are familiar with ADKAR? ProSci, right? The process around ADKAR, why I like that as a change management process, because it really focuses on people, the peaceful aspect of change over process. Notice the first two letters, awareness and desire. So my efforts, my quest for this leader, who was a traditionalist that didn't want to change his ways of doing it because he had success, he scored some big wins in his methodology and his ways of working, and was not really on board. He let everybody else go through Agile training, and I'll be okay. And projects were scoped out, and what's causing this dissonance for him was because every time they come in and he'd ask questions, he didn't know what to ask, and so he just stopped asking questions and started demanding. He wasn't aware of how his behaviors were creating this vacuum of trust. He didn't have the desire to change. And all the coaches in the world, Agile coaches in the world, couldn't help him. There's nothing you could do. So I was working through change management, creating the case, creating the awareness of the potentiality of getting everybody on the same page, speaking the same language, using the same methodology, scoping out projects, looking at the waste, any kind of data I could provide for him to be able to get on board. Short of doing trust falls, to create trust in the team. I don't advocate that, first of all. Okay, there's a time and place for all of that. But that's not what we're looking for, that kind of trust. We're creating the kind of trust where it's okay to share. It's okay to give feedback. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know. And it's okay that ideas come from everywhere, flat in organization. That's the kind of trust that we're working to develop with this guy, with this leader. But ultimately, he made a bad decision. His decision was because, we're okay, we're profitable, we're making money, we're doing okay. He chose to make a decision to bury his head in the sand. And that was a choice because the roadmap was right in front of him. It was very obvious. But the effort that it takes to develop that kind of vulnerability takes time and process. And it's not just like today and yesterday, we can go through classes, we can hear speakers all the time, and they're fantastic. I love the interviewing process, fantastic. It takes a while to get everyone comfortable with it. It takes a while for change to stick. Starting with our leaders, we heard that from Nancy, and we heard that from pretty much anyone of our executive track and saying, we're the problem. We're the ones holding us back. So my coaching and invitation to all of you is the lesson that I learned the hard way. Focus on the leaders first. And if they're asking you to say, hey, come and do an Agile transformation with us, the first question is, okay, who goes first? And if they say, well, I want all my frontline people to go through. Well, you can if you need the work, if you want to do the work. But if you're looking for that transformation, the one that Jimmy was talking about, that not just John was talking about yesterday, say don't do transformations. Focus on outcomes. Start with your leaders. So then, the rest of the story with this particular leader is, so I let him go. They made a decision. We had a huge leadership offsite. All of the executive team met last summer. We went through team building, 3 full days of team building. Now, you talk about intensity. That's that kind of intensity of just like, oh my goodness. I was tired at the end of the week, just hearing and just emotionally investing in this team. And so nothing. Haven't heard anything since the summer. And I got a phone call last week before I came to the conference. from the same HR business partner saying, Bret, we need some help with this team. Can you come and do some conflict resolution training for us? And I said, well, let's look back. Talk to me about some trust. Talk to me about how has anything improved in that space around trust? Because I can give you conflict resolution skills, and that's a skill you should have anyway. That's a fun class to go through. But if you're looking to solve problems because the teams are not functional, and they're dysfunctional, in fact, and working together, and that leader is still there and not willing to commit to creating a culture of vulnerability and creating a culture of trust, it's just wasted effort. It's a good investment in the people, but really from an organizational transformation, it's not going to be there. Build the culture of trust first, or second, or third. Make it it's one of the first things we do, because it is truly that secret sauce that helps an organization get to that next level. Tomorrow when we go through the open space, it'll be one of the questions we talk about. What's first for you? What do we do next to get to that next level? What's your next first thing as relates to going back and saying, how do I get my boss here? How do I get these senior leaders on board with just much passion that you have and an interest and enthusiasm around this discipline in this space, in this domain? How do I get us here? And it starts with trust. Thank you.